ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 31 of DAO Talk Weekly. This is your one-stop shop for everything DAOs. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Frisian.
Sir, welcome back. I just want to shout out our good friend Bardo Bloom for that custom podcast entry music. If you've been listening over the past few weeks, you've probably noticed a sick beat at the beginning of this pod. Really upping the vibes of this podcast. So we'll link his SoundCloud in the show notes for this episode and in future episodes as well. So big shout out to him, and go check him out if you love the music. All right, let's dive into it. A lot of really good news out of not good news, but a lot of news, a lot of action out of the DAO ecosystem this week. Start off with one from Xerex Tomahawk of BanklessDAO. His tweet says, "I was impersonated in the December Coordinape circle at BanklessDAO. This compensation mechanism is in jeopardy of being lost completely if we don't find a way to make it simple resisting. Here's my take in the BanklessDAO weekly roll-up." Frisian, break it down for us.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I think Coordinape has emerged as a popular way of doing sort of like decentralized or bottoms up or democratic compensation in DAOs, where the community can take like a pool of funds and then allocate it amongst themselves, based on, like a democratic process, kind of who contributed the most to a given effort or initiative. And I think it's a really valuable tool for DAOs, but it comes with some some challenges, right? And one challenge with Coordinape is that it's not actually on chain or like permissionless, or trustless. So there needs to be like an admin of the Coordinape instance, which is like an off-chain kind of role, and that allows it creates kind of opens the door for non-democratic uses of Coordinape. And so this is sort of like an instance of Coordinape gone wrong, but I think it's something that we have to address. I think compensation, there's a lot of challenges with that compensation. We've talked about it a lot on this podcast, but one of them is like, if you want to do it in an on-chain manner, it has to be very blunt. So like if you're a DAO today and you're like, okay, we want to invest in, building a new product, you kind of have to figure out, okay, how much funding does that team need up front, and then allocate it in one chunk via like an on-chain vote on Tally. But you can't really, it's like difficult / impossible to really like get granular with that funding in the moment that you originally passed the proposal. And it's not really a good fit either for like the delegates who are in charge of the DAO as a whole. So then the question becomes like, how do you allocate that funding on a more granular basis going forward as you, for example, build out the product? And that's where things like Coordinape come in, right? Or other things like working groups, which we've talked about a lot before, where you can try to create like a subset of people and then allocate funding on a more granular basis. But it gets tricky because it's really difficult to do that in a trustless manner. And you sort of introduce these like centralized elements where someone ends up in kind of an admin-y type position that isn't really able to be checked on chain. And you end up here. So it's something I think we need to figure out as an ecosystem.
So what exactly happened here? Like someone just impersonated him and ended up wrecking the entire community. I didn't have a chance to read the roll up, but most of the comments are like, hey, this isn't necessarily a Coordinape issue. It's more of a
basically, so like I'm not like involved in BanklessDAO, so I don't have like a strong opinion on this. I did read the in-depth description from Tomahawk in the BanklessDAO newsletter, which you should all subscribe to if you're not already. It's really great kind of DAO news source. And basically someone like Tomahawk is saying that someone social engineered their way into the admin role of Coordinape and then use that to like, distribute funds to like themselves and like other people that they kind of had a cabal with in the Coordinape circle. It's not a Coordinape issue, right? But like tools that have this sort of like admin power over funds allow for like these types of human issues, right? So that's where the distinction is. Yeah.
It's not necessarily exactly, Coordinape's fault per se, but it's not going the full route of decentralization, like you mentioned, that may or may not be possible with it.
And I think it's important to understand, like, I don't think we have a solution for this, right? It's not like Coordinape is like a solution that has an admin and then there's a bunch of other solutions that don't. We don't have like a good way yet in the DAO ecosystem to sort of do this type of like compensation without creating some sort of like admin type off-chain power role.
Exactly. I mean, going hand in hand with this is a great article from our CTO and co-founder, Raf. We've mentioned this on the pod before, but it's a great article around how to run on-chain, how to run a DAO on-chain without voting on everything. I would definitely recommend going and checking this one out. I gave it a quick reread before we started the pod, but Frisian, let me give us like a quick 2 to 3 minute breakdown of this article and like how it kind of plays hand in hand to what happened with Coordinape and what happened with BanklessDAO in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like, what are the on-chain, more trustless tools that we have today at our disposal to sort of get closer to the ability to like make decisions, fund initiatives, fund people at a more granular level? Yeah, the first one is like, that initial funding. So if we're funding like, a product launch or whatever, like making sure that that's done in an on-chain way, where like it's autonomous and trustless, and like the DAO has to actually vote it in. And then the next step of that is that same DAO that is working on chain, they should have root access to the funds. So they may not be able to, like in the case of the Coordinape circle, like decide, or it may not make sense for the DAO as a whole to decide who gets funding, but they should be able to revoke the funds, the original like chunk of funds that was allocated if it's being misused. Like in this example, right? Maybe we've been usurped by some sort of like scammer in the Coordinape account. So we're just going to yank those funds. I don't know that is possible to do with Coordinape. I'm not sure, but ideally, you would be able to do this, in whatever the tool is. You can sort of revoke that and then have the DAO revote to refund, right? And to move the funds again towards like a better setup. And then, there's also some ideas of like how to increase the throughput of that top level DAO. Like there's ideas like optimistic governance, where, it's not really possible for the DAO as a whole to make granular decisions about compensation and funding on a super deep level, because you can't be just doing like hundreds of votes, right, with people who don't have context exactly on that initiative. But maybe you can use something like optimistic governance, where there are certain initiatives that need to be passed explicitly, and then others that you can just source funding from the DAO, and what the DAO can do is go in and like check or veto these bad smaller decisions. So that might be a way to increase the throughput of the DAO some, while still retaining that like power of the purse, the ability to veto, where you have like, a few votes a month on like big initiatives. And then there's these like smaller initiatives that are still being funded directly by the top level DAO in a trustless way, but they sort of like pass automatically. And then the DAO can go in and just vote no. Those are some ideas to move us closer in that direction.
Yeah, I think some people maybe get overwhelmed with starting a DAO and thinking it's super technical. You have to be super, you're just super deep organizational design thinker. But there are a lot of ways and a lot of resources to, like the article says, increase governance bandwidth without sacrificing on-chain baseness. So we'll link this article below. It's a really short read, and based on whatever, the RAF breaks it down into different sections of, everything you just mentioned pretty much, and you can dive deeper into each one if you want to, one makes sense and you want to explore one way to build your DAO. Definitely go and check that out. All right. Piece from Punk4156, who doesn't have a punk as their avatar
Yeah,
anymore. Interesting.
new PFP who dis. Well, this person originally had a punk, and then I think they sold it. I think this one was like famously auctioned off because they disagree with the direction of the project. But now they don't even have. Yeah, now it's like totally new PFP who dis.
Damn. It's a change of an era. And it's, their username hasn't changed from punk they're at, but their display name is just 4156, which I think is probably smart. Not locking yourself into one creative project. Probably smart there. All right. Occasions when the DAO has full consensus on amendments to props will be rare, in my opinion, which means that in 90% of cases, proposers will be unable to negotiate with the DAO because different fractions of the DAO will want different things. Proposers should negotiate with the sponsors of the props, and if we think there's not enough scrutiny happening at this level, we should increase the proposal threshold to force coordination between more nowners. By the time props make it on chain, they are best thought of as binary decisions, the end of the conversation versus the beginning of the conversation, because the alternative doesn't scale. Negotiating with 250 plus people is confusing for proposers, a waste of time for nowners, and gets more difficult each day. This seems very obvious to me, but maybe that's just because I'm looking at DAOs and thinking about DAOs all day. But I love the tweet. And again, this is in relation to noun style, but also I think it applies to DAOs as a whole, whether it's a noun style type of governance or not. Yeah, Virgin, thoughts on this?
Yeah, this falls in the same high level bucket of the last discussion we had, but it's a different part of the life cycle. So we just talked about this like off-chain like admin role kind of corrupting that like granular funding. So BanklessDAO funded a Coordinape circle, then that funds distribution got corrupted because we don't have a good way to do that on chain. This is also a scenario where we have trouble doing something on chain, but it's before that larger on-chain proposal is passed. So we'll keep rolling with the example of like a product launch or something that a DAO wants to do. Before we talked about how like you want to fund that at a macro level, kind of with an on-chain trustless vote from the DAO. In this case, like the question is, what are the details of that proposal? Because by the time something comes to an on-chain vote, let's say you're using Governor, you're using Tally, your options are yes, no, abstain, and there are very good like security reasons and kind of trust minimization reasons to limit the options once you're at that like autonomous on-chain like executable proposal stage to have just yes, no, and abstain as the vote options. But it kind of means you're at the very end of the process, right? So if the proposal is not something that's sufficiently satisfactory to the DAO, or if it's like good but not great and the DAO wants to refine, you basically just have to like reject the proposal. You really can't amend it. And so there's this whole like pre-on-chain process that DAOs go through to try to refine proposals. They use things like discourse forum, but if you're involved in DAOs, like they also do things that are not transparent, right? Like maybe the discourse forum discussion is transparent, but also there's like a ton of coordination that went on like in DMs, on calls that like hopefully the DAO is making transparent, but is not transparent by default. And so, basically Punk 4156 is saying like, you have to do that, right? You have to do that before you submit it on chain, because if like everyone isn't satisfied with the terms of the proposal, it's still going to get passed if people like it enough. And then if they don't, it's just going to get declined and you're going to have to start over from scratch. Right. And like, that's true. I completely agree that that's like a best practice today in DAOs, but I think as an industry, we need to figure out how to like bring some of that like negotiation, refinement, ideation, brainstorming, everything. Like we want to bring that as much of that like transparent and like link it with the on-chain activity as possible. So yeah, I kind of want to talk about this just because it's like a similar topic, but different stage in life cycle. This is like pre-proposal. Then there's like large DAO funding proposal, then there's like post-proposal funding allocation. We kind of like have things that we need to figure out from an on-chain perspective at the start and the end of that life cycle.
As we talk about this, I'm just realizing how like fucking nerdy we are. You know, like it just kind of hit me like an existential moment with this podcast. And if you're listening to this, you are one too. So it's fine. It's
Yeah,
not
I
a
think in
bad
the
thing.
last DAO podcast, you called this the most niche podcast in the fucking world, which I think is unfortunately accurate.
That's okay though. I feel like most good things start out super niche, and we're just on the come up here. You know, like, we can all just nerd out about DAOs and organizational design together. You know, um,
It's even worse now because it's the bear market. So like before, there used to be like it was still
yeah.
niche and nerdy, but there was like 10x the number of people who thought they were interested in it, and now all those people are gone. And it's just like, yeah, a viral DAO process tweet gets like 40 likes instead of 400. It's just like, wow, there
But
really
those
are like a
40,
couple hundred of us left.
but those 40 just feel so nice though, right? Like it's so much less, but like each one is just like, it's just chef's kiss, a little crumble
It's
of attention.
it's so real. You're getting that like genuine high signal feedback now. That maybe you weren't getting before. Before everyone was like, who cares? Fund the proposal. Put the money in the Coordinape circle. Well, we've got money to go
Unlimited money,
around.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We got to remember though, like, I know hopefully we will, because I feel like we talk about it so much, and Frisian often talks to me a lot about it, like being financially like relatively like neutral and just don't get too high, don't get too low. But like as we talk about this, I don't want to have like a super cut a year from now when it's a bull market and we're just like throwing money and shit. Like I think it's really important to remember like, and I think I've seen a lot of tweets around it. Like when the price goes up, we just willingly just throw money at it and don't care about price action or fundamentals or anything. But when it's going down, we're like super intense and like care about the fundamentals and things like that. I want to talk about like currency, like DAOs in general and stuff in general. So let's take these bear market vibes and carry them over into whatever comes next. And remember these times now and how much we were thinking about things and how much we wish we could be back in the bull market, I guess, but staying true to our values and staying true to what we learned during this time. So damn, we just got deep all of a sudden. But all right, moving along. Tweet from at Hey Ellie Day. I believe she works with Juicebox, right? Or maybe not. Just a Juicebox fan. Has anyone fucked around with a Tally DAO contract? First of all, Tally doesn't actually have a DAO contract. It's a governor. Tally does not own that. Whatever. We'll get to that in a second. Has anyone fucked around with a Tally DAO contract as the owner of a Juicebox and its members are made up of the tokens created from contributions to the Juicebox project? Either way, I'm about to try it for a very specific use case I have in mind. So, Virgin, two things here. Give the people who maybe not who don't know, because clearly some people don't know, why it's not a Tally DAO contract, and then what is Ellie doing here, and what can we look forward to in the future in terms of like a Juicebox and Tally? Maybe not collaboration, but meshing of the minds.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is really a question about composability, right? How can we make some of these different DAO tools that people are using composable together? In this case, people are using Juicebox to like, fund things, and they're using Tally for governance. How can we make the thing that got funded governable on Tally? A very reasonable question. But the first thing that's important to understand when asking a question like this is that the composability lies like a layer underneath Tally and Juicebox, right? Juicebox is using a set of like standard smart contracts on Ethereum. They lean really heavily on Safe, on Gnosis Safe, as well as some other things that I'm not deeply familiar with. Presumably the ERC 721 standard as well for NFTs, but and other token standards. Tally leans heavily on the governor set of smart contracts, and that's become sort of like the standard implementation of on-chain governance on Ethereum. But it's very important to understand that like Tally is just one stakeholder. We're an important stakeholder because we're like the most popular way that people interact with governor contracts. But governor contracts are inherently permissionless, right? So anyone can build their own interface or Tally competitor or Tally complement, right? Based on those contracts. So step one is like, let's click one layer deeper and understand like, and I think this is really what Ellie is asking, like how do these standards work and can we make them compatible? So that's the first important point, but I think the answer to this is yes. Just might require, some tweaks to the implementations of those contracts on Tally and Juicebox. And it's definitely something that we've been working on at Tally. So we've added support for Gnosis Safe over the past year. And then on the flip side, the Gnosis Guild has built a module for Gnosis Safe that called the Zodiac Governor module that allows you to take like any token that's inside of a safe and make it compatible with Governor. So I think there's like work going on both standards to sort of like make things work together. But there's still probably more work to do here to make that happen. Good news, Dennison, Tally CEO, and Django, who's like a lead contributor at Juicebox, are both awesome. And so I think we're going to figure this out together. And somehow we just got even nerdier.
All right, we're coming up on the end of this episode, but we got a little bit of news, some World Economic Forum DAO news, DAO in the World Economic Forum. Never thought I'd be saying that this soon, which is pretty fucking cool. And then some hot takes and some Tally news, and we'll wrap this thing up. Exciting news for the DAO community. The World Economic Forum and Wharton, I believe this is the Wharton Blockchain and Digital Asset Project, released the DAO Toolkit, a resource for developers, policymakers, and stakeholders looking to engage with DAOs. The toolkit offers frameworks, tools, and resources for DAO operations, governance, law, and policy. Frisian, thoughts on this? This is really fucking cool. You threw this one in the docs, so
yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I was really surprised when I saw the World Economic Forum doing a DAO report, but it's really good. The reason I included this is like you should read it. They did a pretty deep dive into like the current state of the DAO ecosystem. Really interesting examples of DAOs, what are challenges and opportunities going forward. So if you want like all the things that we talk about at Tally in one place, in one concise report that you can send to like boomers and people who wear suits and make them be like, wow, DAOs are legitimate. The World Economic Forum writes about them. You should send them this. It's really good.
Absolutely. We'll link this in the show notes for sure. Okay, tweet from our friend Chase Chapman. Where is Chase working these days? I think
is she still in Metropolis? Yeah,
she's still in Metropolis. Chase is doing everything. Love her. Ultimate paradox in crypto is wanting everyone to participate in governance, while also operating on the assumption that governance tokens should accrue value. So power centralizes in the hands of those with the most capital, making it impossible for everyone to participate. This is something we haven't really talked about recently, but back in I can't believe saying that we can even say the OG days of DAO Talk, back in the first couple episodes, like Frisian used to go on rants and rants and rants about governance tokens, and I would revisit some of those. I think episode 2 is called the token episode. That's a really good listen. I re-listened to that one recently. Go check that one out. Frisian, thoughts on this? I think I know what you're going to say, but I want to hear it.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something here. Today, governance is heavily financialized in most DAOs. It's pretty similar to the way that equity works in the TradFi world, where the ability to make governance decisions at a company is determined based on like who owns shares in the company. And that's like a fully financialized thing. And so like, there are trade-offs to that. One example of a really important governance process in the crypto ecosystem that is not financialized at all is the Ethereum governance process for like the layer 1 blockchain, which we've discussed multiple times on this podcast. There is no token, there is no financialization, and it is much more around contribution, right? So it's like an open source software project, and the ability to like make changes to that project is really based on like, what can you build as an engineer? And then what can you influence other engineers to also build in their implementation of the Ethereum client? And, yeah, there's like pros and cons to that situation. Like the Ethereum governance process, it's not very transparent. And so, in fact, it's like somewhat transparent in the sense that like the calls happen in public and a lot of the documentation is in public, but ultimately there isn't sort of like this opportunity for the community to like actually directly weigh in on decisions, right? But on the flip side, like you probably there's probably a lot of benefits to having sort of like the project not be like as financialized, where people can sort of like buy their way in to make changes to Ethereum. I think that would probably be really bad. And so the question here is like, how can we kind of, because it's a paradox, a lot of times you just like have to make decisions on the trade-off like continuum of like what you want to optimize for. So that's like the first important point is like, I think Chase is right. It is a paradox, and sometimes you just have to like make those choices. But I think there's also some ways we can sort of like move the trade-off curve in a more to sort of like a more utility filled direction over time, where we can like implement changes that allow DAOs to incorporate things like contribution into the governance process. So there's a lot of really great teams working on this. Like one that I'm a big fan of is Govern, right? Where they've created this sort of like interface and like mechanism and on-chain approach to recording contributions on chain and then creating like a graph. So a DAO can say like, okay, who's contributed to what that we care about at our DAO. And then you could potentially do things like assign, you could just distribute tokens to those people. You could assign governance power, based on those on-chain contributions. So I think there are ways that we can work towards that. But ultimately it is a trade-off that I think DAOs have to explore.
Tally newsletter has been reborn. The new captain in place, Cool Horse Girl, Content Go contributor. First Tally newsletter from her. It is Tally newsletter issue number 80. So you are subscribed to the Tally newsletter. That is different than the DAO Talk newsletter. It's the Tally newsletter, which focuses on-chain governance and everything happening in the more DAO DeFi technical world. Go check this one out. Frisian, I know you've worked closely with her on producing this. Give us, sell us on this newsletter.
We're back. It's been a while since the Tally newsletter has gone out. Shout out to the Tally newsletter. It's like the OG content from Tally, started by Monet Supply. It's how I found out about Tally and ultimately ended up working at Tally. A lot of great people read this thing. We've been working with a writer named Thanos, who's been really focused on like NFT DAOs and governance. He's going to keep contributing kind of one-off as there are topics that are interesting to him. But we're rolling out a new writer, our friend Cool Horse Girl. If you, consume Tally content guild stuff, if you're in the content guild, Cool Horse Girl. She does all kinds of dope stuff. She's a writer. She coordinates spaces, coordinates events, handles ops. She's a boss, and she's going to be reporting on DAO governance stuff on a weekly basis via the Tally newsletter. So if you check it out, you'll see the latest on-chain proposals. This is one area where the Tally newsletter is a little different than maybe some of the other newsletters that are out there in the space, where we're really focused on what's happening on-chain, right? So if you want to know like what votes are in play today, where are funds actually going to be moved, and when, who's in favor of them, who's not, who are the delegates that have power in the ecosystem, you can check out the Tally newsletter to see those things. But we're also going to be covering major DAO news and aggregating some of the other content that we love in the space. So shout out to Cool Horse Girl. And if you're not subscribed to the Tally newsletter, check it.
It's very succinct. There's not a ton of writing. It's a lot of links, a lot of aggregation, a lot of curation. A great way to stay up to date with everything that's happening in the DAO world if you don't want to, hear the hot takes, the Thought Boy takes from DAO Talk Studios. So go check that one out, subscribe to that one, get that one in your inbox every week. And then we had a great DAO Talk interview. The first one of 2023 dropped today, just before this podcast. It was being recorded, or is being recorded now. It's a great episode with Reza from PubDAO, Decrypt Media, and Reflexer, someone we've talked about probably a good amount on this pod. Some of his tweets have been highlighted here. We talked decentralized media, marketing, PubDAO, Content Guild, everything. We went pretty deep on a lot of stuff, and I think we're going to record another one at DAO, or not DAO Denver. DAO's at Denver. I'll cut that out. I think we're going to be recording another one at ETH Denver this year, maybe an after hours, like 3-hour Joe Rogan style conversation with Reza. Reza is a wealth of knowledge and has some amazing takes on everything and some amazing thoughts on the future of decentralized media and Web3 media. So great episode. Go check that one out. That's in your RSS feed right now. If you're listening to this, you probably saw it before you click play on this week's episode. So go check that one out. And then we'll finish with a meme of the week. Unless, Frisian, you look like you have something to say about our Reza.
No, just shout out to Boys Club for finally giving their biggest fanboy the merch that he so covets.
Yeah, I can't believe it finally happened. Like it came in the mail. I'm like, what is this package? And then I saw like Boys Club, and I literally almost like screamed. I was so happy.
You should have done an unboxing video, you know?
I love just watching them kill shit. Like they fucking kill it. And I love it. And we need more of that. So shout out Boys Club. Again, we almost ended the streak of talking about Boys Club in every episode.
We'll skip talking about Boys Club next episode.
Maybe, probably not. All right, let's end on the meme of the week. Frisian, I don't know if you've seen this.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about this yesterday. So it's the Office meme where there are two images. In this case, one's a DAO organizational structure that like looks all like modular and decentralized, and then there's a like typical hierarchical or corporate org structure, and it says corporate needs you to find the difference between this picture and this picture, and then they're the same picture. So we talked about this with Maurice's article from last week about the maker manager schedule. Like, look, if you're coordinating things at scale, like there's a bunch of people are trying to like work towards some kind of goal together. Like there's going to be a little bureaucracy, a little politics.
That's been episode 31 of DAO Talk. As always, go subscribe to DAOTalk.substack.com if you're listening to this. Unless you're listening to it and you're one of those that, checks the chain and finds it Thursday night when I post it on all of our distribution platforms. The DAO Talk newsletter has already come out. Go check that out at DAOTalk.substack.com. Stay up to date at TallyXYZ on Twitter and pretty much every social platform out there. And we'll see you next week for another episode of DAO Talk Weekly. Frisian, peace.